Hello. We'd like to thank Salina Media Connection and the Salina Journal for being here to cover this statewide press conference on the release of initiative and announcing the new initiative for Kansans for payday loan reform. It must be said that it's incumbent on every citizen to seek to act as Jesus would and to consider the plight of people who are working and sometimes even not working, but trying to make a living and a life, but for reasons sometimes out of their control have had to take out payday loans from local offices at an unconscionable interest rate, the maximum of which is 391%, and thus keeping them in a sort of debtor's prison. I'm David Norland. I'm here on behalf of my organization, Kansas Interfaith Action. And the local chapter, the North Central chapter, is for people so far from McPherson, Lynchburg, and Salina. And all our active members in faith communities in this area, including Presbyterians, Lutherans, who are a sponsoring organization, Methodists, United Church of Christ, many independent Christian churches, Unitarian Universalist fellowships, as well as Jews and Muslims. Whether in churches, fellowships, mosques, or synagogues, we are united as a coalition in seeking the rights to a life, our lives fully lived, spiritually grounded, and materially sufficient to ease suffering where it exists. And so, as Kansas Interfaith Action, we joined to form common ground with the payday loan reform community. And this statewide community includes Catholic Charities, the Community Care Network, the Episcopal Diocese, Habitat for Humanity, the AFL-CIO, Kansas Appleseed, the Kansas Black Leadership Council, St. Mark United Methodist Church of Wichita, Sunflower Community Action, Disability Rights Center, the Urban League, and many others. So today, in at least 7 of Kansas' largest cities, and we echo the concerns in smaller communities as well, the voice of thousands of Kansans will be heard through work that we do together. If our proposed reforms are adopted, Kansas can experience a likely $30 million stimulus to the economy, and all this without a single dime of cost to the government of Kansas acting through the legislature. So we launched this campaign for everyday Kansans to take back our state and to proclaim a moral, fair, and just economy that goes beyond balancing the budget and works toward balancing people's lives. So I want to introduce Claudette Humphrey, who has been working locally on this issue since 2012. Claudette is with Catholic Charities, and she can tell you stories from the ground up about what has been going on in these communities and what Catholic Charities and the rest of the coalition are doing to make the situation right. We hope that you'll join in this effort. Claudette.
Thank you very much. On every block in the poorest neighborhoods of Salina, you will find a payday or auto title loan company. These lenders have been known to trap borrowers by requiring a payoff on their next payday, charging abusive interest rates well above usury, and not looking at the customer's true ability to repay that loan. I know this firsthand because I lived it. A few years back, I was a single parent, and I had my car break down. And this wonderful thing had come out called a payday loan. And I thought, for the first time, I'm going to take care of my own issue, my own problem. And I went to a payday loan company and I got one of these loans. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand that 2 weeks later on a $500 loan, I would need to pay them $575. And from what my paycheck was, and they asked me if I needed to reloan, absolutely I did. And I had to reloan again and again and again until I finally needed a second loan to try to keep up with the first loan to keep up with my bills. Suffice it to say that I was luckier than most. I had a family who could help me, who was able to provide the money I needed to get out of this situation. And so I did. But that is not the case for so many of the clients I see every single day walking into my office, who are devastated about their finances, who, because they needed one of these loans to get a car repair, to keep up with the utility bill, to pay their rent, suddenly are in the very same situation, only worse, because now they're in this debt that they cannot get out of. Predatory loans devastate our communities. Today we are unveiling the horrible truth about what these companies are allowed to do to our retired, our hardworking, tax-paying Kansas, as well as our most vulnerable. are citizens who lived on fixed incomes, those living on Social Security, those living on disability. Kansas law allows payday and card title lenders to charge interest rates as high as 391%. Under the current state regulations, $300 debt could become $750 in just 5 months. These loans are wrecking family finances. Borrowers who struggle to repay the loan fall behind on the basic expenses, which more often than not were the reason they first sought out the loan. In the end, many look for help from social service agencies like Catholic Charities, and where they often have to turn once they get caught in these predatory loans and this debt. This access is so difficult. They're coming to us trying to access the services that will keep their lights on, when often that is the reason they went into these payday loan companies in the first place. Are there people who need to access short-term loans to fill a gap? Yes, there are most certainly people who need this kind of a benefit. However, the need is for access to reasonable and affordable loans, not debt traps. We know reform is possible because it is working in other states where many of the exact same companies operate and make a reasonable profit. The companies in Ohio and Colorado charge borrowers far less because they successfully reformed their state regulations. The great state of Kansas can do this too. This is my home state, and I know that we together can make the change necessary to make this fair, to make this equitable, to make this right. It is about being morally conscious about what we are doing to the citizens that live within our state, our communities. So what do we want? We want Kansas to reform its laws to ensure that people have enough time to repay the loan in affordable installments over months, not a couple weeks. And we want to limit that amount to be 5% from a paycheck. These safeguards are proven to work in other states. They ensure people can access loans without getting trapped and still provide plenty of profits to morally responsible lenders. In addition, reform will provide an economic stimulus by putting more cash back in consumers' pockets. We estimate that reform will be a stimulus to the Kansas state economy of $30 million without costing our state government anything. Predatory payday and auto title loans as it exists today are unjust and they are abusive. The reforms we propose will help borrowers use the loans as intended, a temporary bridge and not an inescapable trap. We are the Kansans for Payday Loan Reform. I ask on behalf of every client that has come through my doors who have been caught in the trap, who continue in many cases to be caught in the trap. I ask you that you join us as we reclaim a moral economy in the state of Kansas, the great state of Kansas, our state. You can pledge your support by signing up to receive our communications on the website, and certainly please use our hashtag Kansas Payday Reform. Thank you for being here this morning. I will now stand for questions.
Charles, I think you probably want to come to the mic, right? I think.
As a faith-based organization that he has mentioned before, how does this play into, and even as Catholic Charities, how does this play into just the idea of religion, the idea of being faith-based? How does this fit into a government responsibility?
Well, I don't really think it has anything directly to do with faith-based.
Mm-hmm.
I think morality is morality,
Okay.
and I think right is right. And I think 391% just can never be right. That's why we have a usury law. It's 36%. It's why they came in and created the laws where you cannot lend these type of loans, cannot be extended to active duty military because they were being found to be unjust for duty. Unfit for duty because they were so deep into these loans and their debt was so high that the government came in and said, you know, we've got to do something here. And so you cannot extend a loan that is above 36% to our military. I stand and say, in some way, we may not all wear a uniform. We may not all be overseas. We may not all be fighting that type of fight. But I stand here and I would say every American is a patriot. And every American deserves to be treated justly and fairly and morally.
And Charles, I wanted to speak to your question a little bit more. It's a good question. As you can tell by some of the people listed in the payday loan reform, you have some people who might be considered sectarian. You've got the Community Care Network, the Black Leadership Council, Sunflower Community Action, Disability Center, Urban League. So this is a broad coalition. But in terms of Kansas Interfaith Action, I can speak for the people who are there. There were at least 30 people who got together about a month and a half ago at the Church of the Cross here. And it was not just this, but across the board, the kind of moral imperative from whether it's a Christian, Judaic, or Islamic imperative for the good of all people is something that really needs to be tapped. And while this is not specifically a faith initiative, many people of faith are joined in that effort to get legislators to vote the right way. And I say that for a change because Claudette can testify to how long this has been going on. And this has come before the legislature again and again. And on the argument that this would be interrupting with business in this state, they have not taken action. This is the kind of action we're talking about. Business is fine, as she points out, but we're talking about moral business people. We're from Kansas. We have Kansas values, and those values, both faith-based and otherwise, are for a moral economy.
Absolutely.
As she put it very well.
What is the biggest issue that you see when clients come in, and on average, like what are the amounts of the loans that they are currently facing?
Well, I will say that
You got to repeat the question.
she was asking what the average amount of the loans that they've already been extended, and so trying to come to us for assistance, correct?
Yes.
I would say the average is right around $2,000 of a loan. I will say the greatest reason that I turn people away, unfortunately, is because we have a limit of $2,500 on our loans, and it has to pay the person completely out of debt of that type of predatory loans. So if a person is above the $2,500 mark with regard to these loans, unfortunately, that is the number one reason I have to turn people away. Although I still offer the financial coaching and working with them to try to get that debt down to an amount that I can then extend that loan. And we've been very lucky. We partner with Sunflower Bank, and they have been our partner since day one when we first started lending. I came on in 2012 to develop the program. In 2013, we met our first loans, and that was highly in part due to the collaboration that we have with Sunflower Bank that continues today.
And I guess I would put an additional comment, perhaps as a question to Claudette, but it may be that we don't know across the state all the situations in which people seek loans. But the reform of Medicare and expanding Medicare, much of the debt in the state is partly because, if not entirely, because of medical debt. And if people have to take out a loan for the minor expenses, they may find themselves there. So do you find that, do you know? I don't know how much.
I certainly have. I would say the largest number of my clients probably live on fixed incomes, many of them on Social Security and disability. I have numerous clients who first come to me saying that the reason they sought the loan was because they had medical debt or they needed to afford a prescription, not understanding that this would then roll them into a debt trap where they wouldn't be able to afford that prescription anyway. And that's usually why they come to us, is then needing that prescription assistance help.
Yeah. So I think the point needs to be made. I think it's pretty obvious that we have many issues to address in the state. This is not the only one, but it is a key one that really gets at the very depths of where people get into debt traps. So.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask, what's the history of payday loans? How long have they been around? And then you also said that it's been talked about by some legislators. I wanted to see maybe what the history of the payday loans and kind of how that came about.
I don't really know when payday loans first existed. I know here in Salina, it was about, my daughter is almost 25, so it was somewhere around 22 years ago. I remember that was when I first ever heard of payday loans. That's when I first took out that payday loan that I spoke of earlier. So I know they've been here for at least that long. As far as the work to kind of reform this particular situation, I have been, like I said, I came over to Catholic Charities in 2012 to develop the program. And by 2013, I was very involved in advocacy work regarding the reform of predatory lending in our state. And I've gone at least 4 times to the state capitol here to testify, either at hearings or something of that nature. And then I've even been to Washington, D.C. on numerous occasions also to discuss this on a more national level, to try to get that support from the federal government down to our state government. So I know for myself, personally, it's been about a 6 to 7 year fight.
And I can't speak as any sort of expert, but I would like to share an anecdote. Yesterday, I was in my optometrist's office having my lenses replaced and happened to mention this. And of the 4 women working behind the office, they said, oh yeah, they were counting up. We know of at least, we think, about 6 or 7 such businesses at least in Salina. And of course, the most obvious is at the corner of Broadway and Crawford with the neon lights flashing. I mean, it might as well be a video arcade, right? A lot of money went into putting that building there. It's the most obvious example of how there's a lot of money being made and put up in businesses in Salina. And coincidentally, right next to the dollar store where people are having to go also. So there's a whole economy which is sort of, you can argue, either preying on or taking advantage of the situation of poverty in this state. And I would argue that's a poverty of thought as well as a poverty of money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Other than payday loan companies here, are there other programs, either faith-based or other, that provide any kind of loan program so people do not need to go to payday loans?
Absolutely, and I think we're seeing a larger push for those types of loans, those small dollar loans through different organizations. Even some banks are trying to figure out how it is that they might be able to establish these types of loans. I know that right now we do have a program also that we're working on within Catholic Charities itself to kind of be an alternative to, so that rather than going to one of these high dollar, high interest predatory loan companies, that you might be able to come to us for those smaller, small dollar loans for a car repair or something of that nature.
And how are those programs advertised so people can be aware before they go get hooked by payday loans?
Right, and this particular program is still kind of in our pilot, so we haven't done a lot of advertising with regard to this program. We're trying to find out, can we do both sides of everything and do it well? Unfortunately, I'm only one person, and so I can only do so much, but I can tell you that I will continue to work on that project as well as the relief loan, that I will continue to fight this good fight. Although I might only be one person, I'm backed by an amazing agency with amazing coworkers, and again, Sunflower Bank, and now with the Kansas for Payday Loan Reform. I think that you'll see a greater push for many organizations to step up and say, what can we do to stop this continued debt trap?
I might add that this kind of adds to Aaron's question, and I know, Linda, you're aware of this in the community. But there are organizations, for example, like Circles of the Heartland, now called Thrive of the Heartland, and they are and have been in support of that. They're there to raise people up out of and have them themselves take initiative and work out of that cycle of poverty in which they are trapped, and many of them do. But the point is, and I think it's a point raised by your question, that there are many helping agencies, Women Helping Women, for example, where a woman can, say, go on an emergency basis and get tires for her vehicle or whatever it might be. And there's a limit of maybe $300 or so for those grants. But those are stopgap. And again, to your point, many people don't know about that. Having a coordinated access to what's available in the community is key. And that's one thing that Salina does pretty well. But there's always and continues to be a greater and growing need for that, which could be alleviated by this kind of initiative to reduce the burden on them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you all for coming today, and to those out there who are listening, please continue to watch this effort. Please continue to be a part of this effort. Sign up for our communications and hashtag KS Payday Reform. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.